Hello and welcome to this edition of TZM Global Radio. I'm your host for today, James Phillips from the UK chapter of the Zeitgeist Movement and TZM Education. Hope you're doing well out there, guys. The introduction for today's show was a clip from one of my favourite movies growing up, Coming to America, in which Eddie Murphy plays the character Randy Watson, who does a rather marvellous rendition of the Whitney Houston song The Greatest Love of All, which I've always found quite amusing. And the reason for that particular introduction is because of the line, I believe the children are our future. I do happen to agree, perhaps not in a 1980s or early 90s keyboard singing way, but nonetheless, I think the message is a valid one. And apparently I'm not the only one. So I've been harking on about this education thing for quite some time, as many of you will know, and the case for going into schools and just how important it is to deliver what is ultimately an extremely simple train of thought to the next generation. So I got a message on my Facebook recently from Hungary chapter coordinator Sztella Kantor regarding her experience having taken up the materials we've produced for TZM Education. That's at www.tzmeducation.org. And she took those materials into a school in Hungary, delivered them, and had a very decent experience, of which we managed to catch up over TeamSpeak and have a discussion about. So I'm going to include that for you in just a moment. Brief news before I do that is the European meeting in Rotterdam is coming up this weekend. All the tickets are now sold, but there may well be some cancellations. So if you do still want one, then please get in contact with Gilbert on Facebook through the Facebook page for the event, and maybe you might be in luck. But very much looking forward to Rotterdam. I'm going to be doing a workshop on public speaking, because apparently I'm qualified to do that just by the fact that I keep opening my mouth so much. And I'm also going to be talking about another project that I have around this time of year called The First Christmas. So just briefly, for those of you who don't know what The First Christmas is, it is basically a reorientating of the Christmas festivities away from the consumption festival it most obviously is, and towards what it should be, which is gift giving, something human beings have always enjoyed doing, and something that Christmas is supposed to be about, the Christmas spirit, charity, all of those things. But of course it's actually just turned into giving people new shiny things that already really have enough shiny things. So The First Christmas is a Facebook campaign, a visual campaign, to basically put the First Christmas logo, which is a golden Christmas sea with a Christmas hat on top of it, on your profile picture. And that links to the campaign, which basically is trying to say to your friends and family that if they are going to get you anything for Christmas, that you would rather they gave the equivalent to a charity of either theirs or your choice instead, because you already have enough things. You don't need any more things. This may not be excluding presents to do with spending time with each other. I think anybody would say that that's, any reasonable person, I think, would say that that's the most important thing that you should be sharing with people who you apparently care about. You shouldn't just be buying them off with a £20 Argos voucher. That's my personal opinion. And yes, time really is the only currency we have. And so if you're saying that you choose to spend it with someone, I think that that's a pretty valuable statement to make about how you feel about that person. But of course, it could be for charitable causes as well. Now, I know the movement doesn't advocate that charity is the answer. Indeed, we may go as far to say that it's just one of the symptoms of a system that doesn't work, because if your system worked, why would you need charity? But this gift-giving mentality and general true spirit of Christmas, if you will, has to start somewhere. So visual campaigns are a great way of doing this. If we could reach a tipping point on Facebook, then people will start to follow each other out of, peer pressure, for want of a better word. And it doesn't really matter how the ball gets rolling as long as it gets rolling. I mean, one stat I remember from our initial campaign is that in 2010 in the UK, the UK spent 16.2 billion on Christmas, a staggering amount of money, which could have actually fed the entire population or starving population of Earth for 11 months of that year. So almost an entire year on just what we spend on Christmas. Astonishing, really, and reasonably depressing. But you're either going to try to do something positive about it, or you're not. So please do check out the Facebook campaign, The First Christmas, and get involved. But I will be speaking more about that at Rotterdam, and hopefully the talks from that event will be up on our YouTube page soon. So anyway, back to the original topic of this radio show, that being education.
Hello,
and to my
Stella.
interview with Hungary chapter coordinator
Hello,
Stella Kantor about her experience
Thank
taking
you. Fine.
TZM education
Thanks so much for
materials
coming on the
into
show.
schools.
Thank you as well. It's an honor.
I think it's probably good to start off with a little bit of an introduction to yourself. How you got involved with the movement might be a good place to start as well. So do you want to go ahead with that?
Yeah, sure. So I actually my fiance showed me the Zeitgeist movie a few years back, I think, and I really got interested about it. And I found out that there are other movies, and I watched them as well. And I found the website on the internet and other materials, and I started watching those lectures on YouTube. And I finally read the TZM defined book as well, and I got really excited about it. And I think this is indeed what we should all do, or at least try to do. After maybe 1 or 2 years of listening to these lectures and reading the book, I decided that, okay, let's see whether there is a chapter in Hungary. And it turned out that there was, but it was unofficial. So I thought I just go for the option to make it official, and this is how I get promoted, to national coordinator for Hungary. And I especially like the idea to go to schools and give presentations about sustainability and the love of science. And last week I actually got to do a presentation after half a year of being a coordinator. I got to school finally and gave a presentation about sustainability to elementary school children.
Well, that's fantastic, and that's the reason that we're having this conversation right now, because as hopefully everyone out there in TZM land will know by now, I have been bashing everybody over the head with the proverbial TZM education stick for a very long time in terms of doing precisely what you did. And although I know some people have been into schools, I didn't know whether they'd used my materials or not. And perhaps I should give them a platform as well at some point. But the thing that really drew my attention to when you got in contact with me, Stella, was that you'd actually used the materials that Sarah and I have painstakingly put together at the website.
Yes, I really like that presentation you gave, and it got up to YouTube, and I immediately thought that, yes, this would be really good for children, and I don't even have to think hard about what I should tell them. Although I have to say I gave some other info on top of what you already said in those presentations. I extended it a little bit.
And I think that's a worthwhile point mentioning, is that just because you download a presentation from the TZM Education website, the Minds in the Action in Education section, doesn't necessarily mean that it has to stay that way. it's going to need to have changes to work in different cultures, different settings, different environments. I very much doubt anybody would be able to just cut and paste it and just drop it in a classroom and it work.
Yes, I also think so. There were mentions about, for example, Hershey's chocolate sauce, which we don't really know in Hungary. So these had to be changed. And also a few data points I made some research about, and it found out that we could even do better, we can go further, we can go faster, and things like that.
Oh, that's interesting. You've intrigued me now. Please, please do carry on.
Well, I think it was really just about two things that I remember now is that by the time I gave this presentation, the self-driving cars drove like, I don't know, 2 times as much, but they were involved in accidents already. However, they didn't cause those accidents, which is an interesting note. And the other thing is I did some background check on the energy efficiency of vacuum tube transport, this ET3 system, and it turned out that it is not only 50 times more energy efficient than planes, but 100 times more energy efficient than planes, because it's 50 times more energy efficient than electric trains, which are per passenger twice as energy efficient as planes. So I did some background checks, and these things like these turn out, and it was even better, actually.
That's fantastic. If you could send those sources over to us, then it's always good to update your sources that you're taking in for presentations. Obviously, I think this is something the movement in general needs to make sure that they definitely do. That our sourcing of our materials is as robust as it possibly can be. There's no need to rely on spurious sources in this movement. What we advocate is actually mainstream scientific knowledge and information. There really isn't any need to court controversy and such things. So sourcing our materials and sourcing them robustly, I think, is really important, regardless of what age group we're talking to. It shouldn't be just because kids believe you and believe what you say that gives you carte blanche to use whatever sources you like. I think we must make sure we're accurate in what we say. Also, I think with kids, and I don't know if you did this for this specific presentation, but I'd certainly give this as a point of advice. When I talk to kids, the first thing I say is, okay, the first thing I want you to make sure you do is don't believe a word I say. Or I actually say at the end, I say it's very important that you don't believe anything I just told you, because we've been wrong about so many things as a species, and so many people have been wrong about so much stuff that it's really important to not just believe everything you're told. People get things wrong. Adults get things wrong all the time. And of course, you can use the examples of the world being flat as case in point. And I always say, look, go away, check the evidence. And if it doesn't stand up, then you should change your mind according to the evidence. Did you say anything like that in your presentation, or?
Well, when I actually sent the presentation for the principal, I attached this word with the sources, and when I gave the presentation, I think I briefly mentioned it in one sentence in the middle of somewhere. And then we were talking about these numbers and percents and ratios, and I said that these things are subject to change, and we might not even know everything that is that counts. And I think the children had the feeling that I'm not trying to just say these things because I heard these things, and I try to make them feel that they can go on the internet after we did this and do some background checks, and yeah.
So on that note, how easy? I mean, first of all, let's start in a better order here. What drew you to the idea of going into schools?
I don't really know. Maybe because not so long ago I realized that I find the voice with children pretty easily. And then I saw this presentation of you about this, and I thought I would combine these two things.
Well, yes, but we should always work towards our abilities. On that point, though, I think it's important to note to people out there who might be thinking to themselves, well, I don't have that voice to talk to children. Well, first of all, maybe you don't, but maybe someone else in your chapter does. And secondly, even if you didn't have that, then there are videos that you can play for the children if you didn't want to actually give a presentation yourself. That are available at TZM Education and probably some others online as well. So don't feel discouraged just because you find the idea of talking to children a little daunting. I would certainly say, but yeah, I suppose it's pretty similar for me. But I also felt that children would get what we are talking about in a much easier way, in the sense that the solution set for humanity essentially exists technically, but we're just not using it. And leaving the question of, well, we've got all these fantastic solutions, why aren't we using them, has generally been my approach. Is that the style of presentation that you gave, Stella?
Yes, absolutely. At the end, I dedicated a whole slide for this and said the percentages of maybe sustainable techniques we already use, for example, renewable energy in electricity production, and I cited those percentages. And this went for transportation and for agriculture and all the topics we were talking about during the presentation. And I said in the end that, okay, we could actually go up to about 100% for a few decades now. We have the technology and we have the opportunity for maybe decades now, but we don't do that. Why haven't we done that? And I said that I want to leave this question open deliberately, and I want you to think about this. And I asked, is there something we miss, we don't see, or is there something we hold to be too important and we should let go of it? Are things like these that are holding us back from becoming sustainable in these areas which we mentioned?
What were the kind of answers that you got to that question from the kids? And just remind us how old the kids were that you were talking to, please.
The children were from 5th to 8th grade. And as I said, I told them that I would deliberately leave this question open. And they didn't put their hands up at the end to answer it. And maybe they didn't even have a clue at that time. However, there was a physics teacher who was also interested in this presentation, and he was listening. He was in that classroom and he was listening to me. And after we went to the teacher's room, he actually asked me, or do I know the answer for this question? And I very cautiously tried to explain that we already escaped the Malthusian trap, and then that we could create a material abundance for at least to satisfy the needs of all the humans. However, the economic system we use is simply incompatible with abundance, and it is based on competition. And if you compete, you have to be the most. And the most cost-efficient technique is not necessarily the most sustainable method. So sustainability always comes second, and this is why we only have a few percent of sustainable technologies, but never 100. And I dare to cautiously state this to the physics teacher, and he immediately got it, although I didn't really tell this to the children. I'm actually curious to go back to the school and ask the other teacher and maybe this physics teacher who was also in that were the children talking about it? Did they come up with new ideas about the why? And I would like to check out what they figured out by themselves.
Yes, that would definitely be interesting. I mean, unfortunately, in the presentations I've done, I've been able to hear the response of some of the children. It'd be interesting to see whether the response of those children line up with the responses that I got from the kids, which were of the ilk of, well, if we can do all these things, why don't we just print enough money to actually make them and then just make them? Was one of the responses, which I always liked. I thought that was a good one from a 7-year-old. I also love the phrase you used in in the first part of what you were saying there, the Malthusian trap. That's really quite good. I think I'm going to nick that. But in terms of going back to the school, have you got an invitation to go back?
Yes, and actually this was the second time I was there. The first time we agreed that I would give a presentation about the animals for the animals birthday, which was about a month ago. And this was the second presentation, actually, which I anticipated the most, because this was my original plan to go to the school. And after we talked about this in the teacher's room, the teacher, which is the most eco-friendly teacher in that school, offered me to go back in December, I mean in the next month, and play a few of those games which were also attached to this presentation, so that the kids would learn about being cooperative instead of competing all the time. So yes, I was also invited back into this school, which is really great. Which feels really great that they actually told me that they want to work with me on the long run.
That is fantastic news. And I think it just further cements the point that I've been making for a very long time, which is not only is it easy to get the opportunity to talk in schools, if your approach is correct, of course, but actually you will, as long as you do it in the manner that I've been discussing and that we both have done, that you will get invited back again. So it's nice to. It's certainly nice to talk with someone who has had that similar experience and can sort of back up what I've been talking about. But just backing up a little bit, how did you get the initial opportunity to actually go into the school and talk about these sorts of topics?
Well, yes, this is a bit special actually. Because I didn't just send an email and got invited. There was a town hall meeting, well, not a TZM town hall meeting, but a traditional town hall meeting at the beginning of this year in February, I think. And I went there and I spoke up at this meeting and talked about 5 points, concerning recycling or the lack thereof in this town, and so there were a lot of points, but the most important thing maybe in the end was that I suggested that kids could be taught about being sustainable and to actually realize why this is even important. And then the principal, not the principal, the second person in the local school also stood up, and she said that, oh, we already have programs for these, and we organize, for example, days where children collect paper, cardboards, and methods and things like that. And at the end of that town hall meeting, I went up to that lady and asked that if they would be interested in a presentation about sustainability and science, whether they would be open to that. And while she already said that they are keen on that and they are organizing events like that, she could not do anything but say that, oh yeah, we are open to that. And I asked for her email or any email for the school, and she gave me her email address. And it turned out that she didn't really have time for this, so she referred me to the principal. And then I found out that the principal is really into this eco-friendly agenda, and we actually befriended each other and met this other teacher who is, I think, a biology teacher who is also this most eco-friendly teacher from the staff. And we three had a few meetings since, and this biology teacher is regularly, I mean, 2 times I gave presentations, she was in there helping me. Yeah, so this is the long story of me actually getting into this local school and giving this presentation.
So what you're trying to tell me is that you didn't say that you wanted to go in there and talk to the kids about how awful society is, about how corrupt the politicians are, how the Illuminati controls the world, and how you're from a movement that wants to get rid of money then?
Yes, indeed. I was just referring to sustainability and the love of science and whether they are open to it. And they said, yeah, sure, of course. And it indeed worked, what you mentioned about this in your presentation. It just works. I mean, I think it would work 95% of the times.
Well, yeah, I think it would certainly work better than my previous slightly comedic approach. But I think that's the idea that people get in their head. I have been asked. It's like, oh, come on, dude, how the hell are we going to get ourselves into schools to talk to kids about it? You know, look at what we advocate. Look at what we talk about. It's so far out of the box and everything. And it's just interesting the way people think about things like that. They don't think to themselves, well, hang on a second. You know, you don't go in there and say you're from the zeitgeist movement and all these sorts of things. You go in there and you use the easy bait. Everybody's talking about sustainability. All the schools like science. So what are we talking about? We're talking about using the best methods that we actually have to address the biggest problems of our era. I mean, how can that possibly be controversial?
Yes, indeed. And the thing is, I have never ever mentioned that I'm from this organization. I just went there as a concerned citizen who made a presentation about sustainability and put it in a way that children could understand it, and asked an important question at the end: why aren't we doing this?
Well, that's exactly what I've been saying as well. It really doesn't matter what flag you fly. As we always go on about, the point is the train of thought. The point is an education, or relevant one rather. You know, as I've always thought ever since I was a child, and as I was actually told by the adult world, well, look, unless you've got a better idea, unless you've got a better solution, then, you know, shut up. It's just voiceless complaining. Don't do that, you know. And I thought, well, that makes sense. You know, you should probably have a better idea. And that's really the crux of what it is that we actually talk about. And I think Socratic questioning in the way that you and I have both used is the best way to get around any cognitive dissonance that comes up in the heads of people as they go forward in this this system that we all live under, and that hopefully eventually the seeds that we've planted will find roots and start to grow in the fertile soil of sustainable solutions that are clearly actually evident and clear and present. So just to finish up here, I remember you saying that you were considering going back in at some point and delivering a presentation regarding the universe as well. Is that correct?
Indeed, we actually scheduled it for another day, which another school event, which has something in common, and this will come in March, if I remember correctly. I will give that long presentation about the universe and science in March in next year.
That's fantastic. And I think because they don't teach the really interesting stuff about the universe on the curriculum over here in the UK, regarding how actually, the really, really big stuff, how many stars there are and that we know of, such things like that. Like there's more stars in the known universe than there are grains of sand on every beach on Earth. You never get told that stuff. It's just you've got to learn the order of the planets and the fact that they go around the sun, and that's pretty much about it. Over here in the UK, is that a similar sort of thing on the curriculum over there in Hungary, Stella?
Yes, I think so. We didn't really learn about planets about the 5th grade, I think, and it was in geography class, and that wasn't much either. And I was lucky, I think, in this regard, because I was really intrigued by astronomy, actually, and I happened to have an old book at home which was entitled Sky and Earth, and it was a really thick book about astronomy for kids, for children, and I read that book a lot of times and I loved that book. But it was really about these things which is in this presentation, and I think every child would love to hear about these things. They just don't necessarily have a book like this or don't have time to read a book like this, but I think they would love this presentation. Yeah.
I've always said you've got to start from the outside in, so you've got to blow some brain cells and in terms of getting kids interested about a subject, and then you can work in on the detail. I think so often in education what they do is they go, right, memorize the detail. We all know you're going to forget it as soon as you've taken the exam, but the only thing that's important is memorizing the details we tell you. Being interested in the actual subject is really of no consequence to us. We just need to get you through the grades. Is there a very heavily graded system over there in Hungary as well in the schools?
Yes, of course. Grading has 5 levels in Hungary, and it is graded with numbers instead of letters in the Anglo-Saxon culture. And one point about what you mentioned, we actually had a teacher in uni who wanted to explain to us a really complicated issue in grammatics or in grammar, and she actually started out with the labels, and she started out by chalking up the abstract version of the grammar structures instead of coming up with an example and saying that, do you see this word in this example which you know and love? I don't know, chocolate. And this word is represented with this abstract notion, and now you can see the structure. But no, she started with the abstract structure, and she wanted us to remember that without being able to connect to anything we actually have known in our previous lives. And I pointed this out to her, and she was defending her standpoint, then I explained it in another way, and finally I got my point through. And she said that okay, she will try out next time, that she will first say an example which we can relate to, and then talk about the abstract way. And I think this is not a unique situation. The teachers already know these structures, and they presume that the children can easily learn these structures as well, whereas they can only relate to what they already know. And this difference is really important. And I think this is why teachers cannot really get these things to be learned by children, because they don't know where to connect these things.
I think that's you have to make it relevant to the person. I think Jacques Fresco does some wonderful examples of this. Is that you know, if you want to get kids interested in things, then you've got to kind of follow their sort of path a little bit and work from the outside in, so to speak. And I think it was very interesting what you say about relationship of different isolated knowledge sets and the abstract and those sorts of things, because no knowledge is truly isolated in and of itself, you know. And I think the way the school system's set up, at least here in the UK, where you go from maths to history to English to science, but none of them have anything to do with each other, is preposterous. But it serves the kind of industrial mindset that kind of created the educational system to begin with. But I suppose that's a whole other topic. And I suppose for me, we could be working on changing that structure as well, so to speak. And there is a presentation that is available somewhere in the materials on the TZM Education website that goes through that, because I think with regards to where humanity is saying they need to go to be more sustainable, and with technology replacing jobs and all these sorts of things, many academics are now actually arguing that the workplace of the future is going to be for those who can adapt and learn new skills on the spot, rather than just copying down rote information and regurgitating it with sort of left brain skills. It's going to become much more about creativity and being able to be adaptable. And I think a love of learning is intrinsic to that. So another path, if anybody's out there to sort of drive at a little bit, but it is a little bit bigger in scope, is to push that kind of idea that we should follow the evidence that about an intrinsic love of learning not being attached to grades and things like that. Is there a movement towards any of those sorts of educational frameworks in Hungary at all?
Well, teachers are being concerned about this, but as far as I know, they didn't really organize a specific movement to change this. I think they are not really optimistic about being able to change the policy of the Ministry of Education.
Yeah, tell me about it. I recently had a conversation with another activist who said a very simple thing about education. He just said, well, what we need to do is we just need to follow the evidence. And then that's it. Because the evidence is absolutely overwhelming for the sorts of education systems that don't rely on grades and and praise and punishment so much, but actually look towards garnering a more relational and an intrinsic understanding of the topic in question. But of course, grades is like getting money, right? You get a decent grade, you get a decent job, you get a decent salary, and everything's going to be fine. So there's a nice reflection, I suppose, of the economic model in the educational model and back again, that I think so often gets missed by by those in educational reform circles. They don't see the mirror reflection of the society that that created the education system and vice versa. They don't understand that actually the education system as it currently stands is kind of working perfectly. But I think, once again, you've got to go for the low-hanging fruit and the path of least resistance, and the economic system, like every other system really, is going to undergo massive change over the next 10 to 20 years. So rather than saying your system is all wrong, you need to change it, the correct approach is actually to say, look, the economic system is going to change dramatically, and if you don't change with it, then you know where that path leads. There's certainly some people doing that over here in the UK. And if anyone from Hungary is listening to this and wants to pick up that torch, then I think it would probably be a worthwhile one right across the planet to do. But I think that's a larger order conversation. So I think that's probably enough on that for now. I think we're about ready to wrap up, really. Have you got any sort of final comments or statements you'd like to say, Stella?
Well, I think I would just reiterate that don't be afraid. Schools actually are open to this generally. I mean, sustainability and science, these topics at least. You don't have to say you're from TZM, and children are really interested about these topics. They hear about sustainable energy and that they're clean, and they want to know what's up with them and why we still build coal plants, and they are really interested about these things, and also about space, about the universe. They love this. So I can only encourage you to go to schools, and don't be afraid. It will actually go just fine, and you will love it, they will love it, and it will be a great experience. And yes, maybe one thing that by going to schools, you not only influence the children, they actually go home and talk about these things to their parents, and they talk about to their teachers, and they have a feedback effect on the adults as well.
Yeah, I think that is a really, really decent point that I'm very pleased you raised, and it wasn't overlooked, because invariably those questions go home and they ask their parents, and what are their parents going to say? Well, I don't actually know. There isn't really another answer, and there's nothing worse than telling a kid, well, I don't know, you go find out, because they'll just drive them nuts. They want to know, and that's a fantastic thing. And I should just, I suppose, reiterate that the universe thing is not just some abstract thing that's very interesting to educate kids about. It also serves to help undermine our small place in this universe, and the humility of our place in it, and our tiny little snippet of time that we actually get upon this pale blue dot to actually make a difference. So on that sort of Sagan-esque point, I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Thank you very much for coming on today, Stella. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you taking the time to actually listen to the points that I was making and take them into schools. And I'm absolutely overjoyed that you had a positive experience, as I, without sounding too up my own backside, I knew you would have a positive experience. So I'm really pleased that you did. Thanks very much for coming on, Stella. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me onto this show, and I hope you will hear exponentially more experiences like I had from this time on.
Likewise. Cheers.
So I hope you all enjoyed that interview, and I hope that it inspires some of you out there to go and do the same thing. It is nice to get a confirmation that I'm not crazy, and that this approach definitely does work, is worthwhile, and in fact possibly the most worthwhile thing that we can do as individual members of this movement. But if going into schools is not your thing in either presentation form or taking in a video and then discussing it with the kids, then that's no problem. There are other things you can do, like, for instance, be a host of this radio show, perhaps doing an interview with someone from another organization or who values the idea of sustainability, etc., etc. If that is your bag, then by all means go do it, and then send your submissions for that radio show to submit@thezeitgeistmovement.com. So, to close out on a rather different topic, and one I spoke about earlier, seeing as Christmas festivities are upon us, I will leave you with the very wise words of Eric Idle in his very beautiful song, Fuck Christmas. Take care, guys. Speak to you soon.